Today's session is Getting the Most Out of Your Fiery Investment. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, John Grubb, Senior Manager, Worldwide Educational Services. John will take us through quite a bit of information that I'm sure everyone will find quite educational. So without further delay, John, it's all yours. Let's get started.
Thanks, Yael. Welcome and good day, everyone. I am so glad you're all able to join us this morning. I think we've got a nice collection of information for you, especially around how to get the most out of your fiery investment. So let's go over a little bit of the goals of the session. We're going to start with a brief overview of what a fiery is, and then we'll get into what I think is a really nice takeaway for you, which is we're organizing the coverage of material to really kind of exemplify a checklist for success. And what I mean by that is that as we go through the various topics in today's webinar session, we're actually going to be able to cover the topics in a way that creates, when we're all said and done with this, a really great checklist for you to take away and be able to apply directly in your daily work with using your fiery. We'll talk specifically in demo various attributes of the job properties, both from the fiery print driver as well as Command WorkStation. And we'll get into some practical examples using the fiery workflows that we will talk about today. And then lastly, we'll summarize and get back to you with some tips and resources so that you can keep your education going with understanding more and even leveraging more ability with your fiery digital front end. So the other thing I want to make sure and mention is this is while maybe an introductory to all of the fiery information to get the most out of what your investment is with the fiery. There are folks that are maybe more advanced, and for those, we do also have more in-depth information. We have previous World of Fiery webinars, the tips and tricks for fiery Command WorkStation, automating job submission, and taking document layout to the next level. All of those resources are available to you folks as well. But we do want to make sure and let you know that we've got a lot of great information, and even for more advanced users, this is a great review and primer to really make sure you're leveraging what you do have in front of you every day with the fiery investment. So let's start a little bit about discussing what is a fiery. So some of the terms that we use when you think about previously in kind of and I won't say the old days, but really kind of in the early 90s and into the 2000s, when you thought of any device that connected to a digital printer, it usually was called a RIP, a raster image processor. And really, what a RIP is, it's a processing application or a processing tool that takes files that appear on your computer, and when you hit print, it actually turns them into the language of the print engine and processes them and then lets you print on the printer. That is a totally accurate term, by the way, for what a fiery can do. There's other terms too, PostScript RIP, PDF RIP. When it all comes down to it, when you think of the term raster image processor or RIP, that's really exemplifying or really saying that that's kind of a tool that you use to print jobs. It's a very focused tool because it processes files and prints them. But when we talk about the fiery, we really want to think of it in terms of a digital front end. And a digital front end is much more than a tool. If you think of a RIP as being a hammer, really what a digital front end is actually a toolbox. It's a collection of tools. And what we'll talk about today is how the fiery is a digital front end, and just like a toolbox, provides a number of different solutions, more than just ripping a file. The fiery comes in a couple of different form factors. The first one is an embedded or bustled fiery. Sometimes these are directly on the back of the print engine themselves or could be inside the printer as well. The other form factor is an external fiery. This is typically either a standalone box or, in this case, like you see on this image, a separate workstation that has a monitor, keyboard, mouse, and furniture applied to it. Both of these are the typical form factors that you find for fiery DFEs. When we talk about the value of a fiery, a lot of the capabilities that you have certainly around what we bring to the table at EFI with innovation and ease of use, and really the combination of the list of items on the left is really what customers are looking for. When they come back to us every time they buy a new print engine, they want to utilize the EFI solution set with the fiery DFE. And there's a reason for that, because with the fiery DFE, you actually have a vast collection of tools centered usually around Command WorkStation, by the way. We'll talk about that a little bit later, that provides you a number of different functionalities, such as job management, like how do you get jobs printed, how do you automate jobs when you submit jobs to print, color management, pre-flighting and soft proofing, all ways to validate jobs are correct before they go to final output, paper and media management, document make ready, how do you ensure the document is able to do more than just print pages, variable data printing, what kind of tools are available to be able to do personalized output. Of course, the processing and ripping, which is really our key functionality when it comes to the ripping capabilities. Finishing support, in other words, the ability of the Fiery to understand and utilize the integrated finishing that's built into the digital printer that you're connected to. And then connectivity to business intelligence and management, in this case, our MIS and web-to-print solutions. All of these things add huge value to the Fiery and to solutions for customers using them. And when you take a look at, this is really primarily the Fiery. EFI, however, offers kind of a complete ecosystem for success, because if you look at where we're at the tail end of this in the processing area where the Fiery servers are located, EFI offers a solution all the way through the process from job submission to processing, as well as the business management components. So our various products like Digital Storefront, plus all of our options for productivity and pre-press and make-ready, all give us the ability to have a very large and broad selection of solutions for your workflow. Now we're going to talk a little bit specific about the environments that you have when you're trying to print to a digital front end, in this case the Fiery. What we have is a comparison between what we call a typical print driver workflow. Somebody goes file P print from an application, and when they do that, there's nothing wrong with that. They typically, though, just create pages. And that's fine because you get great color and you get great output from the Fiery every time when you use a print driver. An operator workflow, which is something a little bit different, that is the ability of being able to add more to just the pages that are printed. You actually create documents. One of the goals that we want to try to have during this session is to give you an experience that will elevate your print driver workflow that you currently have today. Using the Fiery driver, we want to get you from printing just pages to printing documents. There's a high value in understanding how to take knowledge about using the Fiery print driver to get more out of it. And this is one of the areas of focus that we'll have with our time this morning. The other area that we have as a takeaway from this session is, as I mentioned before, a best practices checklist. As we go through the various components of the webinar, you'll see me reference whether or not we're talking about job automation or job management, some of the job make-ready tools, color, paper or media managed workflows, or the ways to find help. These are all going to be delivered to you as a PDF, by the way, with interactive hyperlinks that take you directly to resources to get you the answers you need for understanding and utilizing the best practices we're recommending. So let's get into the print driver workflow. So when we look at the best practices, this is talking about things like job automation and job management. We're going to go back to that print driver workflow, and we're going to talk a little bit about the ability to use that better. But before we start, we're going to go ahead and open this up to a poll.
All right, so we have here a couple questions that we want you to answer quickly. Take a minute. Let us know what percentage of your jobs you're submitting through the Fiery print driver. And then on the second question, how often you actually are using Command WorkStation to manage your print jobs. So as you're taking time to answer this survey, we'll have John continue, and we'll get back and take a look at the answers submitted by our audience.
Great. Thanks, Gail. So we're going to start with a little overview of the Fiery job properties with a demo here. So I'm going to open up Fiery driver. So when you open up Fiery driver for the first time, what you'll see is a user interface that looks like this. It's made up of a number of graphical tabs that are at the top of the bar. You'll see here quick access is the first one. This gives you a customizable review of your job at a glance. All these little things like copies and paper type and document size. You get to choose what you want to see on this, and this is exactly what it's meant to be. It's quick access to the properties that you want to have control for printing the job. Job info, of course, has more details about copies and destination. We'll talk about media in a little bit, but this is where, for example, with this tab, you can control the various types of paper stocks you'd wish to print on. In the layout area, this is a commonly used tab because in this tab, it lets you control things specifically around duplexing or what we'll be demoing a little bit later, which is making a booklet. Those are really nice features to have an understanding of. Color tab. So the color tab has a lot of sophisticated capabilities, but at the high level, if you do nothing else, it prints pretty darn well right out of the box. But for some of you, you might find that you actually want to investigate a little bit more what it can do. I'm not sure how many of you have done this, but even pressing something like the basic settings, you can see takes you to a workflow of how your colors are handled for a particular job. It helps you identify how you can choose the various CMYK, RGB, spot color, or gray and black color spaces for printing your job, as well as the type of output target or profile you wish to match to. And it also gives you an indicator about the calibration that you've used for that print job. Pretty handy to have, but some of you may not even know that it was there. The imaging tab. This is the tab that you have that has input and control over the control of image quality for the engine that you're printing to. This means that you can control things like resolution. There might be settings for improving text and graphics or image quality because you have various ways to print depending on the print engine you're connected to. You can actually control that through the print driver. The finishing tab is where you can control things like folding and stapling, and this is where whatever device you've got connected to your print engine has abilities. You can actually choose them right here graphically. You can see the little icons that kind of show you what you're doing. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then we have the VDP tab, which talks a little bit about how you can integrate the built-in variable data solution Freeform, which comes with every Fiery, for example, as well as more sophisticated variable data workflows like search paths. I'm going to spend a little bit of time, though, right now demoing a common task, creating a booklet using the printer driver. So let's go ahead and get the application up. So we're going to actually print from Adobe Acrobat. We've got a large file. It's a single page, 8.5 by 11, and we want to make a booklet out of it. So we don't want to just create pages here. We actually want to make something that's actually usable in the form of a booklet from a single page document. So we're going to go ahead and hit print. And then when you choose print, you'll get the dialog box that comes up that allows you to choose the right printer, connect to the Fiery, hit properties. Now here's your Fiery driver and your quick access. In this case, these are the defaults for the custom that I've got up. The first thing that you do, though, is that you're going to want to go to the Layout tab. And you'll notice on the left-hand side of the Layout tab, you'll actually see Normal, Gang Up, and Booklet. And this is where we want to focus our efforts here. We want to actually click on the button that says Booklet. And when we do that, you have a couple of choices. If you haven't ever done this before, you can actually launch the Booklet Wizard, and it takes you through a graphical process that you can choose all the correct settings to print a booklet. I've done that before, so I'm going to go ahead and do something that doesn't use the wizard. I'm going to actually choose the paper size, because right now it says paper size for 2-ups. I'm going to go ahead and choose 1117, because that's the 2-up size I want to print to, which means I'm going to get 2 pages per side of an 1117. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose the finishing option, which takes me to the ability, let me scroll down here to the fold. So under the folding section in finishing on this particular printer, I'm going to choose the right folding, which is going to be the multi-half fold. And then I'm going to choose my stapling to do center. And at this point, if I hit OK and printed the job, you would get the ability of the Fiery driver then to create a booklet. Again, not too difficult, 4 or 5 clicks to get through this, but you kind of have to do this every time you make a booklet. So I kind of want to focus a little bit more now about how we can take this fairly easy to use process and make it even more efficient and easy. And that is to go in and talk a little bit about a driver preset. So you saw how we went in and created the booklet settings. So let's imagine we're back where we were. We just created all of the settings. We've selected our finishing. We selected our layout. We've done the booklet call out for the right paper size. I can go now, if I've got everything the way I want it, and I know that I'm going to have several jobs just like this, I can go to the presets in the upper right-hand corner, and I can choose Save Preset. Now what this is going to do is it's going to look at all the settings that I've created for this particular job, and it's going to allow me to create a custom name to apply to it. In this case, I'm going to call it booklet. And when I do that, I now have recorded essentially the settings necessary to create a booklet so that the next time I print, all I have to do is choose booklet and print. I don't have to do anything else. So let me demonstrate that. So now I'm back at another job, a different job. This one's an 8-page job. Last one's a 70-page job. So here's an 8-page job, and I want to make a booklet out of it. So I go back to the app. I hit print. I then choose, again, my printer, hit job properties. And at this point, instead of going through the whole exercise I did before, this now becomes pretty much a one-click experience. I go in and go to presets, and you'll notice now my list shows booklet under local presets at the bottom of the list. I choose booklet, and I hit done. And what does that mean for you? What that means is that with a single click, you've been able to create a booklet using the print driver. You've essentially elevated the experience to go from a regular print driver or a typical print driver workflow to a much more efficient near operator level workflow, all within the Fiery print driver. It is a huge, huge time saver, huge advantage, but it's more than just saving time. You really need to focus on using presets for common tasks, mostly because you want to reduce human error, especially if you got more sophisticated workflows around color. Think of the ability to eliminate the mistakes that are made when you run through a number of jobs, especially if you're printing a lot of jobs. You also have the ability, of course, to improve your efficiency because, I don't know about you, I'd much rather click once than click 3 or 4 or 5 times per job. And as I mentioned before, while it's important, of course, to focus on reducing error and improving efficiency, time is money. And what you're doing with using presets is saving time and money. So it's a huge, huge advantage for you to understand and spend a little bit more time, if you haven't already done so, about understanding and utilizing Fiery presets. There's also an added bonus, because if you really do take the time to understand presets in the Fiery driver and use them, it becomes what we call our Fiery efficiency multiplier effect, which means that you have the ability to be super efficient in your Fiery driver, but as you learn more or try to implement and use Fiery Command WorkStation, you can take the same preset concept that you've already understood in the Fiery driver and apply it as a server preset within Command WorkStation, which means that everything you just did from the driver, you can now apply to a number of different jobs from anybody printing to the Fiery via Command WorkStation. Huge efficiency saver. There's also another added benefit, because if you understand server presets have a couple of extra really cool added efficiency bonuses. One of them is that you can take those presets and apply them or utilize them in conjunction with what are called hot folders, which is a really great drag and drop printing utility that you have. And from Command WorkStation and with server presets, you can even further automate that ability because you have presets that you already were familiar with and apply them to this workflow. You can do the same thing for virtual printers, meaning that you have the ability to understand server presets. You can utilize those settings and apply them and distribute them in the form of a virtual printer on the network. In other words, this one little task and tool to understand in the presets back of the Fiery driver has huge implications in a positive way for improving and leveraging your investment with your Fiery. So how can you learn more about what we just talked about? We've done a couple of things, and we'll summarize this at the end of the webinar as well. With this webinar, you'll be given access to a number of e-learning courses. One of them is the Fiery 220, Creating Automated Workflows. That will be included with this webinar. We have some Fiery how-to self-paced tutorials that discuss how to automate workflows using these various presets and applications within Command WorkStation for server presets. And then we also had last year completed a recorded webinar called Automating Job Submission. All of these are available to you readily, and we'll make sure that you have the information at the end of the session so you'll know how to get more, especially around the e-learning courses. But we hope that this part of this demonstration was helpful for you and you take it and apply it to your knowledge on a daily basis. So now we're going to focus on Command WorkStation. We're going to give you a little bit of a primer. The topics, the best practices topics that will be hit upon are things around job management and job make ready. We'll also discuss help and how to find it in the context of Command WorkStation. So let's go ahead and pull up the poll results, see what we've got.
All right, let's take a look. So, looks like we have a mix here of, how they are sending the job to print, and also quite a mix on usage of Command WorkStation. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the good news is here, it sounds like a lot of you are at least touching on the technology, and I think the really great news is with this webinar, it's going to be a great reinforcement of all of the things that you might be doing and wanting to build upon. So this is really good to see. We'd like to make sure for those folks that are wanting to learn more that we make sure and give you the right kind of tools so that when you leave this session, you can apply even more knowledge about success, about using your firing. Thanks.
Great. So let's move on.
So let's talk a little bit about Firing Command WorkStation. Quick primer. What is it? Well, you think about Firing Command WorkStation, and it's really kind of like a central nervous system for your printing environment. And by that I mean that Command WorkStation acts as a way to offer key functionality around things like job management, color, and job production. Those are the real goals of what Command WorkStation is trying to do, and do it in a way that makes sense to anybody who's using it. So when we take a look at the key areas within Command WorkStation that we'll briefly talk about today, there's a couple of areas of familiarity that I want to make sure that I leave you with. We'll be talking about Device Center and Job Center, and within Job Center, things around job organization, the previewing capabilities, and how and where to get help. So we're going to go ahead and start with Device Center, so you understand where and what that is. So Device Center, when you launch Command WorkStation, is one of the two tabs that you see on the main user interface. Right next to Device Center is Job Center, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But under Device Center, you really get device-specific information that shows up. And in this case, the default tab that populates is the General tab. So you'll notice under Device Center, you have General, Color Setup, Resources, Workflows, Users, and Logs. We'll spend just a little bit of time, though, just to make sure you are understanding where what the General tab is. This is where you find out the status of your Fiery itself, plus the options and packages that are installed. And if you take a look and scroll over to configuration, the configuration area is where the setup and connectivity for your Fiery has been created. This is typically done by the specialists who come out and connect your Fiery to the digital print engine. I did want to spend a little bit of time, though, that you understand that when we start talking about color and calibration, that one of the other areas that is covered under Device Center is under Tools. And when you get to Tools, this is also where you can find calibration. It's one of a couple of areas, but I want to make sure that you understand that in order to get to calibration from Device Center, you just need to go on to General, go to the Tools tab, and in the right-hand corner you see the word Calibrate. Clicking that button will then take you to the calibration process to calibrate your Fiery. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Let's go back now. That's the calibration button. Let's go back now and talk about Job Center. So as I mentioned before, we're back at Command WorkStation. Job Center is the tab that's next to Device Center. And when you look at Job Center, there's a number of different tools that are in play. Job Center is your main user interface for your job management of files that are coming through, being received, printed, processed, and archived or held. This is a really, and probably the primary tool that users or operators are using in order to manage jobs on a Fiery. One of the things that you can take a look at, for example, is for any job that you have in your queues, you can do a number of different ways to get to it. You can click the Properties button on the ribbon on top, or you can right-click the job and get to Properties. And that allows you then to get to the specific settings of a print job in order for you to actually be able to change them after the fact. This is really powerful if, for example, say you printed a job and you wanted to change the paper size, or you wanted to change it from simplex to duplex so that you're printing from one side and now wanting to print on two sides. The ability to do that, if you're using just a print driver, is that you have to go back and reprint the job. And while that's not the most efficient way in the world, what Command WorkStation does, however, is replace that process by being able to let you do things like change your job from single-sided to two-sided printing from a user interface that doesn't make you go back and reprint the job. pretty cool. You can also certainly do other things here as well. You can turn a single page job into a booklet just like we did from the driver for somebody who may not know how to print booklets. But as I mentioned before, having the ability to change or alter settings of a job after the fact, really cool. This is a key feature and functionality, of course. And even for somebody who's already using the print driver, going into using Command WorkStation gives you this ability to control your own jobs. We also have an area over on the right-hand edge called Job Summary. It's really kind of the preview tab. I can look at my job. I can click through the pages of how they're actually going to print on the printer. As a matter of fact, if you go through and take a look at the magnifying glass icon or the preview button, which have been highlighted here, if you click on either of those, you get to a more elaborate preview environment, which looks like this, which allows you to actually see the printed pages in the order in which they'll be printed. So you can validate, for example, what this looks like to take that single page 8.5 by 11 and create a booklet. So we can see actually how this whole booklet looks before it actually prints. A fantastic tool to double check your work so you're not wasting time or money before you print the job. Again, these kind of soft proofing tools, hugely valuable, used all the time by folks who are using Command WorkStation, and a great value and a recommended application for what you do with Command WorkStation. So let's talk a little bit about help. So we have a couple of tools here. So first of all, built into Command WorkStation is an online help. So if we go ahead and look at the UI here for a second, when you have Command WorkStation and go to the help button, what you have now is the ability to get a very robust online help. This has got contextual information that tells you exactly how you need to solve or go through the procedures to workflow various capabilities of Command WorkStation. A really great tool. It's built into your help. You don't have to search for it. Just know that it's there. It's really quite useful. The other thing that we have is in the help menu, which is called our What's New. So if you click on What's New, which is right here, you'll get a brief summary of all the new features for the release of Command WorkStation that you've got launched, in this case Command WorkStation 5.7. All of the cool new features that we've introduced as CWS 5.7 are now being shown in the What's New. Get a brief overview of those. That's kind of cool. And then our online resources. I'll spend a little bit more time on this a little bit later, but this is a really great one-stop shop for all of the extra resources that you may need for things like support and training and product downloads and access to our webinars, like the recorded sessions that we've previously done with World of Firing. All right. One other thing that we wanted to make sure and cover was a unique application that is a function of the Mac operating system. So if you go to and launch Command WorkStation on a Mac OS, what you'll have is the ability under Help to have an extra field. It's the search field. It's the very top field that shows up. And with the Mac operating system, what happens is if you actually start to type in some of the words that you're looking for help, in this case I typed or started typing calibrate, it will actually show you where to go to get to the calibration menu. This is true for any of the menu selections that you have under Command WorkStation. Any menu topic is searchable, so it shows you where to find it, and this is by virtue of the Mac operating system. So it's kind of a cool thing. For those of you who are Mac users, this is a often missed value of the Mac operating system in conjunction with Command WorkStation Help. All right. So let's move in to talk a little bit about calibration and color. So when we look at our best practice topics, we'll be focusing on color and in particular some tips and tricks and best practices around media managed workflow. So what is calibration? Well, if you look at companies or industry, or in this case an institution called International Color Consortium, there is a definition of calibration that falls into a process that measures or adjusts the color response of a device, in this case a fiery connected printer, to a known state. And really what that means is you're adjusting the color output to take into consideration things like paper type or humidity or temperature or color gamut or color space of the device that you're printing with. And calibration really is a key functionality of the Fiery controller, and I thought I'd exemplify this a little bit more visually with what calibration is by saying, first of all, this is what we consider color consistency. When we talk about calibration in terms of a connected digital front end, the Fiery controller, we're saying this is what gives you color consistency. Another way to look at this is, really, why do you need calibration? I want to show you that if we have, in this case, what looks to be a bullseye and these little black dots, let's say, represent the same print job printed 7 times. If you have an uncalibrated output or uncalibrated system, you will get color, but it certainly is not going to look or has the potential not to look similar to one another. Some might be blue, some might be a red cast. When you calibrate, in this case, say for example, we've calibrated using the Fiery, what you get is a much more consistent output, meaning that now all of the pages look very close to one another. And for the vast majority of users, consistency and having that ability to reproduce the same colors day in and day out is pretty much all people really want. A vast majority of folks are totally happy with this. What I do want to tell you, though, is that above and beyond just being able to calibrate and give you consistency, the Fiery DFE plus some of our options like Color Profiler Suite, for example, allows you to do something unique. It allows you to go in and thumbprint a color workflow that is maybe very demanding, something that you have to match exactly or try to match as close as possible. For example, a printing press or another type of output on a particular paper stock. What happens is when you start to use calibration on a consistent basis, you create a foundation for being able to do one other thing, and that is to profile. And when you're able to profile, which is essentially kind of doing a custom thumbprint of a particular workflow for color, you get the ability to have calibration and profiling to drive a higher level of accuracy. So when you look at the bullseye, you've got consistency, which a lot of people are happy with, but if you want consistency and accuracy, the highest recommended workflow for color is to calibrate and profile. And, a lot of high-end shops do this. It's a common workflow. So where do you find calibration? Well, one of the areas is under Job Center. So if you launch Command WorkStation and you click the Job Center tab, one of the buttons that shows up in the bar is Calibrate. That's one way to get to it. The other way we talked about earlier, which is Device Center. When you click on Device Center, you click Tools, you'll find the Calibrate button there as well. So how can you learn more about how to calibrate and even how to profile? Well, what we prepared for you is another e-learning course that we're providing with this. It's Optimizing Color and Consistency. It talks a lot about the various environmental conditions that affect color, as well as walk you through the actual calibration process with a Fiery DFE. We've got self-paced tutorials, the how-tos, and we also have a recorded webinar, the 3 key steps to get the right color on the first try. It was a very well-attended webinar, and we want to make sure that you have access to that as well. These are all great resources to leverage and learn more about how to get color out of your Fiery DFE and leverage that investment. So I'm going to move into a quick best practice around media-defined profiling. So first of all, what is media-defined profiling? We talked about profiling being the ability to be accurate, not just consistent, but consistent and accurate. So let's assume for a second that we want to actually exemplify what we're trying to do here. And that is that, typically speaking, when you're doing a media-defined profile, by its very nature, you're looking at the characteristics of the paper stock that you're printing on, and you're trying to improve the quality of matching a particular color or series of colors on that particular paper. That's important to know is because even though you have color profiles, what people may not recommend or may not realize is that you can actually apply a specific color profile to a paper stock. So every job may have its own particular color paper profile. So why do it? Well, let's take a look at this visual example. This is a printed example that used a number of different stocks, and it's asking the question, which paper stock is printed using the same ink? Now, it could be toner as well, by the way, because what I'm about to show you is a very common issue with regard to printing on various paper stocks, and that is that paper stocks themselves carry a number of different color characteristics, and even if you printed the exact same ink or toner on the paper, you're going to get a different visual example. And it's by profiling that allows you to really leverage and get the most accurate version of that particular toner or ink on the paper. So it's a really great visual example of what happens and why you do things like media managed or media applied profiles. So let's go to the media defined profile demo real quick. And we're going to go back to Command WorkStation. We're going to click on Device Center. And then when we do that, we go to the third tab over. So there's General, Color Setup, and then we go to Resources. And we go to Resources. The first tab that's highlighted is Paper Catalog. That's what we're going to spend our time here for the next minute or two. And then under Paper Catalog, I'm going to down here. I'm trying to find my Sterling. There it is. Okay, so I've got a Sterling, in tray one, a Sterling digital paper stock. And you'll notice it says the tabs at the top, name, media, pre-punch, paper type, media weight, document size, back color profile, front color profile. That's where we're going to try to affect that. So I'm going to go ahead and click Edit. And when you do that, you'll get this little warning saying it's being used in a tray. Only the product ID, front color profile, and back color profile can be modified. You're okay with that. Click OK. And this is the window that most people don't know exists or aren't using it, even if they have color profiles, and that is that every paper stock that you're printing on has the ability, if you look down at the bottom, to associate a color profile to that paper stock. So if I've gone through and got a very, in this case maybe a glossy paper stock, and I want to know the specific effects of color on that glossy paper stock, I can profile that paper stock and then create a unique, in this case, I'll open that up, you'll see there's a Sterling Premium Digital Enhanced Text Output Profile, Optimized Profile for that paper stock. And I select that. And now when I hit OK, I have applied essentially a custom output profile or custom profile for that paper stock that is now going to give me the most accurate color on that particular paper. It's essentially, in a nutshell, your media-defined profiling workflow. It's very simple. You only have to do it once after you've created your profiles, and you've now elevated your ability to get your color from great to fabulous, because now you've got the most accurate and consistent color applied to that particular workflow. So how can you learn more? Again, we've got our Optimizing Color and Consistency course. We've got our tutorials. I want to make sure that you're also familiar, we'll talk about this specifically a little bit later, but we've got the Fiery Forums. And in the Fiery Forums, there's actually a color forum, a Fiery Color Forum, and it's a really, really great place to spend some time, especially if you have detailed questions or want to search the knowledge base or topics that were covered. Can't tell you enough how great that particular resource is. We also have an upcoming webinar called Achieving Great Output Quality with Your Paper. That's on July 15th, and we kind of really want to make sure if this is interesting to you, register today. This is all really great stuff, and learning more about how paper affects your output and what you can do about it is a really great way to leverage your knowledge. So let's talk about best practices and resources. We'll kind of start wrapping up some of the things that we've covered today to make sure you understand what you've learned and where you can go for more. So the big thing is, and you saw this with the online help that came out of the Command WorkStation, the online resources out of the online help or help button from Command WorkStation. In addition to being found on Command WorkStation's help button, on EFI.com, you can go to your Fiery online resources as well. And again, to kind of reiterate, this page will take you to the links for things like the Fiery Forums, the downloads for the products and drivers, the self-paced tutorials, the how-to guides as we call them, all under the training moniker. We also have access and overviews to all of our e-learning courses. The e-learning courses are really pretty cool. They're 30 to 40 minutes a pop, and they give you the ability to interact with the material as though you're sitting in front of a Fiery. So if you haven't tried them, the courses are highly interactive. We do quizzing. We do an exam at the end of the course. You get a printable completion certificate each time. It's pretty neat. We also have links on the online resources page for Fiery certification. We have a couple of certification programs that we offer for people who wish to elevate their knowledge and get recognition for their efforts for learning more about the Fiery. And then we also have additional resources like our recorded webinar sessions from World of Fiery. So, in summary, let's make sure and go back and realize that the topics that we've covered around automation and job management and job make-ready, color and media managed workflow and health have all been collected and put into the best practices checklist that we've created for you. This will be made available to you shortly after our webinar. And in addition to that, we have tasks that you really should be asking yourself to make sure that you're doing and getting the most out of your investment for each one of these topics. We also created a 5-course bundle, e-learning bundle, for all of the registrants. This will be covering Command WorkStation, fiery tools for job management, creating automated workflows, optimizing color and consistency, and booklet making and imposition. All of those things that were topics that we covered today are in the 5-course bundle that we're making available for everyone. One of the other deliverables that we'll have for attendees of this webinar will be, of course, the PDF of the best practices checklist, which has not only the steps necessary to ensure daily success for the various items that we've identified, but also links to get information to learn more. So how do you get all this stuff? Well, you'll be receiving email with details, and you got to sign up and begin your coursework by June 30th. But other than that, we really look forward to having you guys take advantage of these great tools. We also do one other thing, which is a 10% off our Fiery Professional Certification Program. So for those of you attending, you'll also be given information, a coupon code or discount code that will allow you to purchase the certification program at a 10% discount as a thank you for attending the webinar. Lastly, our next webinar, May 20th, mark your calendars. Best practices for producing outstanding image quality results. This is going to be a fantastic session to really understand the nuts and bolts about quality issues and how to optimize output, specifically around how design impacts those issues. So register now, take advantage of it. These are going to be a really fantastic set of information that's covered on the 20th of May. I'm going to turn this back over to Yal.
All right, so we'll give John a minute. We've gotten quite a number of questions coming in already. Keep them coming. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as our time permits. As he does that, I want to point you to a few other educational opportunities we have here at EFI. You can certainly expand your learning with these upcoming sessions. These are just a sampling of the sessions we have coming from our MIS and web-to-print experts within EFI. So take a look. The first one's happening tomorrow. Great opportunity for anybody looking at Direct Smile and cross-media in general to learn what that's all about. But we'll make sure to provide you with a quick link to get to these. And John, are we ready for questions?
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a couple of questions. First of all, one of them was, how do I activate the preview in the job summary panel? There are a number of questions around this, so I'm going to make sure and kind of get back to it. So first of all, the preview will only show up for jobs that have been ripped. So if you've processed a job or processed and held a job, that's when you'll be able to actually see the preview in the preview pane. Next question that came up, it says, I noticed there are 27 jobs in the printing queue. Our Fiery only holds 10. What version of CWS is shown here? Well, here's the thing. It has not too much to do with what version of CWS. It actually is the fact that if you go into the configuration setting on the Fiery, you can set the printed queue for up to 99 jobs. So it may very well be that your setting for the configuration for number of jobs in the queue is just set to a lower number. So how can I enable the Fiery driver? Well, it's not a matter of enablement, but you'll have the ability to actually download and use the Fiery driver directly. You can actually use web tools, for example, to download the driver. Those things are all built in so that, and again, if you have additional questions, usually the person who installed your Fiery should have been able to give you the information. But just go to the web tools for your Fiery. That's a good way to get access to the driver for both Windows and Mac. Next question, how can we get the Fiery to print a full bleed 8.5 by 11 perfect bind document? Well, I think you're much more than an introductory user to the Fiery. But the Fiery can only print what the printer can print. Most printers have to leave a small margin around the outside edge of a printed sheet because there's a maximum imageable area that any printer has. So the only way that you can generally do that is if your printer has a white print margin, is you actually have to print that 8.5 by 11 on a larger sheet size and then trim it down. So there's a couple of things. The alternative to that, of course, is that if you really want 8.5 by 11, that's the only way to do it. But if you're willing to go to a slightly smaller size than 8.5 by 11, you can trim off that white non-printable print margin and leave yourself with a slightly smaller document. All right, the next question is, please preface that some of these options are only available if your printer or press has the proper modules installed. I'll talk about that in a second. Also, some presets are server-based only if the RIP accepts server-side presets. That's a lot of information in there. So first of all, the good point to bring out is some of the options that I talked about, it's very true. Depending on the printer and Fiery that you've purchased, some of the things that I talked about are either pre-installed or act as an option that must be purchased after or with the Fiery. So in many cases, you may very well find that that capability is already built in. So it's good to reference the server presets that are only supported in System 10 plus Fieries. That server preset is a fairly new feature, but it's still highly valuable. Also, hot folders and virtual printers are standard on the server only, and generally with an option kit with bustled and embedded controllers. Next question is, why would you use multi-half fold rather than booklet fold? Well, that totally depends on the printer. So different printers call booklet finishing options different names. In the preset that we used, it happened to be called the multi-half fold. We present the same names in the Fiery interface that the printer uses, so you may very well find, depending on the manufacturer of your printer, they have a different name for it. Will these presets be applicable to a job before a RIP? So again, depending on the presets, if this is a driver preset, for example, of course you're going to have access to the driver if that's what you're asking for things. The presets, if they're a driver preset, are obviously pre-RIP. Post-RIP, you can make and create presets on Command WorkStation and save them as a server preset and apply them. So, afterwards for held jobs. So presets are always applied before RIP. Changing the preset will require the job to be reprocessed in many cases. So next question is there a limit on the number of presets you can save? Let's see. We don't have any upper limit on the number of presets you can save. The practical limit, though, will be based on your usability and how many you can effectively use in one list. So that's a limitation on your part, I think. So can you explain the differences of local presets versus server presets? So think of it this way. Local presets are created and applied through your Fiery driver. Server presets are created, managed, and distributed and used on the Command WorkStation interface. Next question. Here's a good one. We found a bug with Command WorkStation. What's the best way to report it? Well, first thing you should do is make sure and use your normal support channels. So if you're using a partner who's integrated your product for you, go ahead and report it that way. But certainly on the Fiery forums, we really do a good job of looking at the forums with product owners and product managers as well as engineering staff, so we keep a very well proctored eye on the forums. Also, we have a new version of Command WorkStation posted yesterday, so we want to make sure that as things come up, you have a method to get information back to us. What's the server default profile shown with the paper catalog? Well, the server default profile is going to be what you've set up under configuration. So if the configuration has a particular paper stock that you've defined, that's going to be, or specific profile that you've defined as your default profile, that's what's going to populate your paper catalog unless you change it. So again, even in worst case, you're still getting a pretty darn good color out of the box because our defaults, when linked with calibration, do a great job. But changing that default is the mechanism I showed in our best practices tip around media-defined profiles. When is the right time to turn on or off the APPE? That's the Adobe Print Engine. Well, most useful when printing jobs that take advantage of complicated gradients and transparencies, specifically from Adobe Creative Suite. You can also get these to print without the Adobe Print Engine using customizations that the Fiery has added to our PostScript RIP. but having both gives an alternative mechanism to print challenging files. So you may very well find that if you got really complicated layers, transparencies, and gradients, you can get to that by virtue of using the APPE. What's the best way to, okay, hold on a sec here. Does driver impose feature work without impose compose option? Well, yes, good question. So what I tried to demonstrate was that even without our imposition option, the booklet maker feature allows you, and by the way, along with the booklet maker feature is also the gang up option, but the booklet maker feature allows you to create booklets via imposition without having to have the impose option. Well, if you want to customize the imposition beyond that, as what we're shown in the job properties and on the Fiery driver, we could recommend an impose license to open up impose and apply those additional features. Additionally, you can do some imposition through Fiery View, which is a free application that you can do that does a visual-based imposition as well. Let's see. Can automatic percentages be adjusted in the booklet setting? Yes, the general rule, if the option can be selected while the booklet is set, then the option can be used. Let's see. Does the PC have the search feed under help? So it's a good question. So I showed you the Mac OS contextual search. The Windows side does not. So what you'll see when you go to help under Command WorkStation is it'll go right to the help field. More questions. All right, let's see here. All right. If I have a question about color calibration, my husband states when a job is uploaded to the and the requested color is black, it doesn't print out black from the printer. Is this a Fiery issue, a job load issue, or a printer issue? Well, you know what? It really, yes, it doesn't have anything to do with calibration. It very well may be something to do with the file. For example, if it was a PDF file that you're trying to print that you had no control over, and that file happened to come from an application that defined gray or black as not gray or black at all, but rather RGB, which a lot of RGB apps do, then the file has got RGB in it, and it may never get to black unless you have the controls in the Fiery to turn that on or off. Let's see. How can we make a profile if we want to add a new paper stock that is not on the list? Well, you can actually define paper depending on the connectivity to the engine. You can either define the paper on the printer, or you can define the paper within Paper Catalog and have that communicate back to the printer. You can name the characteristics that you wish to have, and you can associate it to the printer itself. There was another question, by the way, too, about profiling. The profile that I use is the same profile from our fingerprinted press. If I use only our press profile, is it hindering the best color coming from our system and papers? It seems common sense question, but I've been told to use only this profile. Well, if you have created a profile for your press, what I recommend is, given the fact that that press is using Cyan, yellow, and black printing inks and not toners, which have a higher color gamut, it's not a bad starting place, but what a lot of people generally do is maybe go to something more along industry standards, like using G7, for example. So both the press and the output device, in this case a digital printer with toner, can use an industry standard target versus a custom press profile. Okay, so we have another question. Can you explain the difference between printing through Acrobat and going direct to Command WorkStation? I noticed that the job is done more accurately size-wise when using Command WorkStation. So there is a difference between going File P print and introducing a print driver workflow, or in this case the question is, what happens when you use Command WorkStation and import it? So for the most part, what you're going to be doing is, when you import a job, you're going to be taking the size that Adobe Acrobat used to define the job. When you go File P print, you'll be assigning a print size or paper size created by the PPD through the print driver. So it really just means a matter of syncing up on the right print size, 8.5 by 11 versus LTR. Sometimes that causes some discrepancies, but my point is both of them should get you to the same place, but the differences may be in the fact that the PPD or print driver unique for that print engine has a slightly different size than the actual specification for the Adobe Acrobat PDF, which is what could be defaulted or used when you have the file that's saved as a letter or LTR size. Okay, will you cover spot colors in any presentations? So
we had a session last year, actually in April, almost a year ago. Recordings to all of our World of Fiery webinars are available online, and we'll provide a link with our follow-up email so you can have ready access to those. We had a session specifically about spot colors and how to match those successfully. So for you out there looking to learn more about spot color and spot color matching, we have that for you. Go ahead.
Let's see if there's any other, take a look at any other questions that came up. I'm looking, how do we, hold on one sec, we're just kind of reviewing all the questions that are up here.
Yeah, there's a ton of questions.
This is a great one. How many times should you calibrate? Well, you know, really as often as needed. I guess really what it comes down to is that depending on your environmental conditions, temperature, humidity, depending on the paper stock you're using, so a lot of recycled stock that acts like a sponge to all those environmental conditions, or maybe paper that is in the same room and kept in the same capabilities, kept within the same environment as the print engine. The calibration requirements for keeping things consistent is exactly that. The more consistency you have on your environment and the controls around that, the more, or less I should say, you would need to calibrate. But really, calibration once a day, if you haven't already done that, is a good starting point. And we have people, I can tell you, that can calibrate with every shift change, and then we have some people who actually, because of the high value of the jobs, are calibrating with every job.
And I would like to also go back to World of Fiery webinars from last year. We did have a session that covered calibration in more depth than what John touched on. And I do recommend that you go back to that one as well and kind of see the best practices around calibration, calibrating and profiling. It was a really, as John indicated earlier, well-attended session and great to go back to look at it. So I think we have time for maybe one more question. And then anybody we didn't get to, we do apologize. We had a ton of questions. We will compile everything into one FAQ document and provide that to you with the follow-up email we promised to send out early next week. So look for that. And we'll also, as promised, try to get back to you individually with questions you specifically asked. We'll do our best to do that as soon as possible. Just a ton of questions. So one more. Do it.
I saw one here that was interesting. I'm interfacing with an older printer. We're talking a printer maybe from a system 8R2. So for us, that's several years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago or so. Some Command WorkStation options are not available. Also, our Fiery driver looks nothing like what's shown. What's up? Well, the good news is with our latest tools that we provided to you, you can still download. Matter of fact, you can find out compatibility on the versions of the Fieries that you have for these. Now, keep in mind, you will get access to the latest versions of Command WorkStation. Your print driver is still limited to the PPDs that are created for the device, which is of an older vintage. But to the extent that we can enable older devices with these new capabilities, we've done that with Command WorkStation and certainly being sure to take advantage of that. I hope that this session was a great start for those of you that are just getting your feet wet with the Fiery. I want to make sure that you have understood the value of taking advantage of some of the key areas that we talked about. Specifically, get your hands around understanding presets so that you can get your hands on Command WorkStation, where you can turn that into hot folders and virtual printers and print lots of great pages. We really look forward to sharing information with you. We hope we put a great package of material together for you guys today. And I do appreciate you all taking time this morning in this webinar, and thank you for attending.
Thank you, John. Great session. We hope to see you back May 20th for our next session. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.